to this Bible study of the Banking Blessings Ministry. My name is Goodluck Ofemu, and this is my wife,
Obi Ofemu.
We're happy you join us today as we continue our study series on husband-wife interactions. In the last Bible study, we started a mini-series on Abraham-Sarah relationship. And we saw in the first part of the series that God spoke to Abraham on behalf of Abraham and Sarah. He spoke to Abraham, meaning gave instructions to him, received commitments from him, made promises to him, but it is all about his life and Sarah. So it was about Abraham and Sarah. He spoke to Abraham, and we believe it's because Abraham and Sarah are one in God, because they are husband and wife. A very good example was when God called Abraham to leave his home country and set up a new home in Canaan and begin to sow the seeds for the ancestral lineage of the Messiah. This was clearly a mission for a husband and wife team. So when God called Abraham, he called Abraham and Sarah, even though the physical communication was with Abraham alone. We believe this is because Abraham and Sarah are one in God. Today we look at the second study in which Abraham and Sarah, in their interaction with Hagar, showed that their union, they considered their union more important than anything. And we're going to look at this. It's a very delicate kind of interaction because they needed something from Hagar, and Hagar was ready to deliver, but he was delivering with an attitude that suggested he wanted to get between Abraham and Sarah, and they wouldn't have any of it. It doesn't matter what he had for them. They were willing to cast her out of the way in order to stay together as husband and wife. And then we will look back at the beginning of their relationship to try to understand how the bond between them, and what we will see is that their bond grew over a very long period, their marital bond. We will look at this in detail. But before we proceed, I wonder if my wife has an opening statement.
Well, I want to thank the partners and the viewers, those that connected us. The story of Abraham and Sarah and the interaction always has something that we learn from, whether Abraham as the father of faith, or God doing what seems to be impossible with Sarah, giving her a child even when she was past childbearing, or learning from their relationship as a couple. There's always something interesting that God has for us to do, and I'm really looking forward to this tonight.
Well, so am I. And we'll begin by just looking at a summary of what we're going to learn. That we will look at the strength and longevity of a marital bond between Abraham and Sarah. As I said, we'll look at how their relationship started and where it was at the time that they had this interaction with Sarah. Of course, we will see, not interaction with Sarah, but interaction with Hagar. And we will see through that interaction that Abraham and Sarah showed that their union is more important to them than anything. That their union, the strength of their union, the longevity of their union comes first. And whatever else rides on top of it. So that they have to take care of it, take care of first, and whatever threatened it, will be cast away. And this is one of a very strong lesson that we're going to learn about marital relationships. Abraham and Sarah actually illustrated this very well. Our lesson is going to come from a very short section of Genesis chapter 16, verses 1 through 15. Well, what happened was Abraham and Sarah had now lived about 10 years in Canaan. And but they still don't have a child. They've been married for a long time. We'll look at that later in this lesson. They've lived for a very long time. And then after 10 years in Canaan, remember they went to Canaan to start a family, well, not to start a family, they're already a family, but to sow the seeds of the ancestral lineage for the Messiah through their family, through essentially their family needed to grow. In modern times, we call it starting a family. I think when a man and a woman get married, they've started a family. Of course, when they have a child, then they'll start those that will, they're giving birth to those that will continue the family. So that's what Abraham and Sarah expected. And of course, remember the promise that God made to Abraham. So all of this probably made them anxious about having a child. And then Sarah said, well, I have a maid servant. I'm going to let you. She was talking to her husband, Abraham. So I'm going to let you take my maid servant, Hagar, as a wife. Go and lie with her, and so that I may have a child through her. That is very important. She considered this part of her effort to bear a child for Abraham. So if Hagar bore a child, if that interaction that she now permitted between Abraham and Hagar resulted in a child, she considered that to be a child that came from her somehow. And this, of course, for this to work, she expected Hagar to remain loyal and subservient. To remain, well, she's going to have a marital interaction kind of with Abraham, but she will still be subservient to Sarah. And of course, they expected her to have a child. Let us look at this in the Bible, Genesis chapter 16, verses 1 through 4. And you remember, anytime you want to say something before you read, that's fine.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Genesis chapter 16, reading from the New King James Version. Verse 1. Now Sarai, Abraham's wife, had borne him no children, and she had an Egyptian maid servant whose name was Hagar. So Sarai said to Abram, "See now, the Lord has restrained me from bearing children. Please go into my maid, perhaps I shall obtain children by her." And Abram heeded the voice of Sarai. Then Sarah, Abram's wife, took Hagar, her maid, the Egyptian, and gave her to her husband Abram to be his wife, after Abram had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan. Verse 4. So he went into Hagar, and she conceived.
Yeah, we'll continue this reading, but let us look at this a little bit. Hagar conceived. So that one part of what she was expected to do had been fulfilled. She was pregnant and on her way to having a child. But then she developed an attitude. She began to despise Sarai. She began to pull away from Sarai as a mistress. She now began to look at Sarai as a competitor, as a rival. This didn't go down very well with Sarai. So she complained to Abraham, and we'll look at that. But let us read about this aspect of the interaction from verses 4 and 5.
Okay. We continue with Genesis 16, verse 4. And when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress became despised in her eyes. Then Sarah said to Abram, My wrong be upon you. I gave my maid into your embrace, and when she saw that she had conceived, I became despised in her eyes. The Lord judge between you and me.
Well, this is it. For Abraham, this was, her wife was Sarah. And the relationship between them was so strong, and we'll see why. There is really a history to it. But she would not have she would not tolerate Hagar seeing herself as a rival to Sarai. So he told Sarai, he said, look, she is your maid. Whatever you want, do to her. Whichever way you want to treat her. Essentially, she surrendered control totally. I hope people understand the meaning of this, because this happens in a lot of societies where in our society, for example, the way it would happen is maybe a woman does not have a child for her husband, and then she works with her husband to marry a wife for her husband. This is a wife for her husband, but she is coming from under her, and she's supposed to be subservient to the woman that has arranged for her marriage. But the problem is, often such wives come in and want to displace the wife that was there before them. So that's what Hagar wanted. As soon as she became pregnant, she felt that she could displace Sarai, at least push her aside from Abraham, and then begin to take her place. And Abraham would not have that at all. So he returned control of Hagar completely to Sarai, and authorized Sarai to do whatever she wanted with Hagar. Of course, Sarai treated Hagar harshly until Hagar read the message and decided to leave. So she picked up and left. We are not going to follow the story of Hagar, what happened when she left and how God called her back. That is all there. But we want to focus on what this interaction means to Abraham and Sarah, and why their marital bond was so strong. Remember, let's leave this. We're going to get to it, because it's not just, Hagar wasn't just going to have a child. There is a purpose that this child was going to fulfill. But Abraham, or Abraham as he was called at that time, didn't care about that as much as he cared about his love for his wife Sarai. Let us read Genesis chapter 16, verse 6, just one verse, and then we'll continue with the discussion.
Genesis chapter 16, verse 6. So Abram said to Sarai, Indeed, your maid is in your hand. Do to her as you please. And when Sarah dealt harshly with her, she fled from her presence.
Well, so this, I call this a high stakes decision, because remember, and we are going to go through this. We are going to step back to Genesis 15, verses 1 to 5, to see this was the beginning of the covenant, God's covenant with Abraham. When God told Abraham that a child from his body because he had greeted Abraham and said he's Abraham's reward, that Abraham should not be concerned about anything. Then Abraham said, well, I had you, but I don't have a child. You have not given me a child, and it's Eliezer of Damascus, a child that another person bore in my home, essentially a servant in his home, that it was this person that was going to inherit, become his heir. So, how are you promising me all these things when you haven't given me a child to be my heir? And then God told Abraham and said, look, a child from your body will be your heir. This man Eliezer will not be your heir. So when it was around that time that Sarai offered Hagar to Abraham, and then Abraham interacted with Hagar, and Hagar conceived. So it was very easy for Abraham to say, I know this Hagar is being rude to you and all that, but remember, he's carrying an important child. God promised us a lot of things through this child, and let us treat her softly, so that she will bear the child that she's carrying for us, because this is the child through whom that's what he believed at that time, that it was through this child that God's promise to them will be fulfilled. So this was a high step. Driving Hagar out of their house as they did was a high stakes decision. They were giving up something important to make sure that nothing came between them, that nothing threatened their marital bond. This is the point I'm trying to make here. That driving Hagar out of their house, they didn't say Hagar go, but she was treated harshly, and she got the message and left. They did that because their union was more important to them than anything else, including the possibility of Hagar bearing a child through whom God will fulfill his promise to Abraham and Sarah. But let us read the beginning of the covenant. The covenant we're going to study in another Bible study, but the beginning here is relevant to this discussion, because that's where God told Abraham that a child from his body will be his heir. But Abraham didn't know how this child will come from his body. So he could have assumed that it was the child that Hagar was carrying. Okay, let us look at Genesis 15 verses 1 to 5.
Genesis chapter 15 verse 1. After these things, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision, saying, do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your exceedingly great reward. But Abram said, Lord God, what will you give me, seeing I go childless, and the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus? Then Abram said, look, you have given me no offspring. Indeed, one born in my house is my heir. Verse 4. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him, saying, this one shall not be your heir, but one who will come from your own body shall be your heir. Verse 5. Then he brought him outside and said, look now toward heaven and count the stars, if you are able to number them. And he said to him, so shall your descendants be.
So God had made that promise to Abraham, and Abraham saw what he could have interpreted as the beginning of the fulfillment of that promise. But when the person carrying that beginning of fulfillment threatened to be a problem between him and his wife Sarah, he authorized Sarah or agreed with Sarah and supported Sarah, and they drove Hagar out of their house. Well, let's look back at their relationship. At this time, remember, Abraham was 75 when God called him. We're going to see evidence in the Bible that there is a 10-year difference between him and Sarah. So at the time this was happening, they had been in Canaan for 10 years. So at the time this was happening, Abraham was 85 years old and Sarah was 75. Well, we'll see evidence also that Sarah was his half-sister. That was a child, a girl that was born to his father through another woman, not through his mother. Which means that, in fact, Sarah was his baby sister. And we know about this through an interaction that occurred when Sarah and Abraham got into an area, I think it was in Egypt or something. Abraham told Sarah to present herself as his sister. Well, this didn't go very well. One of the kings found out that, hey, this lady is really your wife, not your sister. Abraham said, yeah, she is my wife, but she is indeed my sister. That's when he explained that Sarah was in fact a half-sister to him, and then they became man and wife. They got married. We don't know. The Bible doesn't tell us exactly how. So we are guessing. Let's say Abraham was 35 years to 40 years when they got married. Then if that is the case, then they have lived about 45 to 50 years together at the time that they had this interaction with Hagar. So they've lived a long time. I'm saying here more than 50 years. Their relationship had grown together since that time. But before we jump ahead, let us read 3 sections from Genesis. Genesis chapter 12 verse 4, just to see that Abraham was 75 years old when God called him. Then chapter 17 verse 17, I think what we are going to see there is the age relationship between Abraham and Sarah, that there is a 10-year difference. Abraham is 10 years older than Sarah. And then chapter 20 verses 11 through 12, this is where this interaction occurred between Abraham and a king that was going to maybe have some interactions with Sarai, not knowing that Sarai was Abraham's wife. And then when he found out, he confronted Abraham, and Abraham explained. So these 3 sections simply help us understand how they got married, sort of, and the age relationship, and how long they had lived together before they had this interaction with Hagar.
Yeah, I think before we continue, there was something you said, but I think our viewers need to get it correct.
Yeah.
And you have also said that. The intention, Abraham and Sarah did not drive Hagar. The intention was not to drive her away, but she ran from the oppression of Sarah.
Yeah.
And when we read further down, we'll see where the angel that he met in the wilderness told her to go back and submit to the authority of his mistress.
Yes.
So that's very important. She was running because she didn't want to submit herself to that authority.
Yeah.
She was in opposition, and that opposition, kind of drew harshness from Sarah, who wanted to instill her authority in her home.
Yes.
So, and Hagar would not have it. She was rebellious and she ran away.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's very important, for us to note that. But what you have said, despite the precious child in quotes that she was carrying at that time, because that was the only seed that Abraham had.
Yeah.
They didn't go after her. They didn't they didn't. The Bible didn't tell us that Abraham started telling Sarah, "See what we've done. We've lost this child." But there was no such interaction.
Yeah.
They still held on to themselves,
Yes.
to their union.
Yes.
Okay. So I believe that this is important for us to get it right. It wasn't Abraham and Sarah that drove her. She ran away because she was in rebellion.
Yes. And they counted their union more important than whatever she was going to do for them. They wanted her, but if she wouldn't stay, if she wouldn't.
I also believe somehow that by this time they were realizing that they were in error in what they did.
Okay.
Somehow, I believe so, that they were realizing. Because, you see, God has been dealing with Abraham. And the blessings that come from him don't cause that kind of sorrow. You know. So if this was of God, you know, things would have fallen in line. Not for the... I mean, it was the Jewish culture at that time.
Yeah.
That when a woman couldn't give birth to children for her husband, she was expected actually, or she had the freedom to take her maid
Yes.
and give to the husband. Look at the case of Rachel and Jacob as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so it was a culture at that time. But you see, Rachel named all her children from that her maid servant.
Yeah.
Which showed that maid servant was still subservient to her.
Yes.
But Hagar was in rebellion.
Yeah.
She was in rebellion. She despised the same mistress. You know, the fact that she has given you to her husband does not mean she has ceased to be your mistress.
Yeah.
So it was in rebellion that she ran away.
Yeah.
And all that. And that was why it's important that the angel told her, go back and submit to to her authority.
Yeah.
Because that's the right thing to do.
Okay.
So,
okay. Yeah. Let's read
let's go to Genesis. Genesis 12, verse 4. So Abraham departed as the Lord had spoken to him, and Lot went with him. And Abraham was 75 years old when he departed from Haran.
And that's the only point we want to learn from this particular verse. At this time, you know, Abraham was 75 years old when he left the Ur of the Chaldeans to move to when he left Haran to go to Canaan.
Okay, Genesis chapter 17, verse 17. Then Abraham fell on his face and laughed, and said in his heart, shall a child be born to a man who is 100 years old? And shall Sarah, who is 90 years old, bear a child? Okay,
again, this is a verse we're reading just to learn something. They remind ourselves of one thing, that there is a 10-year difference between Abraham and Sarah. In this particular incident, it's 190, but this is something that happened way ahead of where we are in their account today. We're just looking at it to help us understand how long they have been together. At the time that their interaction with Hagar occurred, Abraham was 85. Since there is 10-year difference between him and Sarah was 75 at that time.
Yes.
And if they're married, you know, they probably have lived 40 to 50 years together by this time. Okay, let's proceed.
In fact, it's important to note that even though this is not like the subject of today's Bible study, but this was the time that God specifically explained to Abraham that it is Sarah that will bear the child of covenant.
Yes, yes.
Amen.
Yeah.
Because all along, if you look at verse 12, verse 15, when he mentioned the issue of the child from your body, it was always the child from your body, the child from your body will be your own heir, you know. But at this point, it's when God specifically told them, and I believe this was after he attended to the strangers.
Yes. Okay. It's somewhere there. Yeah. Okay.
So this was the time that it became it was specific that it was Sarah who was going to
Yeah.
bear that child. So,
Okay. Then the next reading.
verse 20, chapter 20, verse 11. And Abraham said, because I thought, surely the fear of God is not in this place, and they will kill me on account of my wife. But indeed she is truly my sister. She is the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother. And she became my wife.
Yes. So here Abraham was explaining why she told Sarah, why they tried to deceive the men in an area that they were living in temporarily. I told them that Sarah was his sister. And then the king asked him, why are you doing this? And then Abraham explained, said, well, I was afraid people would kill me on account of her. But in fact, she really is my sister. She is a daughter that my father had from another woman, not from my mother. Okay, so these things tell us the relationship between Abraham and Sarah. Sarah was his baby sister. Because she was a half sister, and their custom allowed half brothers and half sisters to get married, Abraham married her. Now, being 10 years older than Sarah meant that she had been with Sarah all along, all the time, from time of birth. And he had probably cared for her because he was her sister, a junior sister, baby sister. The baby sister senior brother relationship is a very strong relationship. It actually is the beginning of bonding between two people. In this particular case, Abraham and Sarah were able to transition from their baby sister big brother relationship to a marital relationship. Abraham has always known Sarah as somebody he cared for, somebody he loved, somebody he protected, somebody he nurtured, he helped nurture. And Sarah grew up seeing Abraham in this way in her life. And as things would happen, they were able to get married. And they got married, and at the time that they were having this interaction with Hagar, this person that Abraham knew as a baby sister had been with him for all her life. So for 75 years, she had been with him. He had cared for her all this time. And Sarah, from whenever she became, as she was growing up, she saw this person caring for her. So the bond between them had a long time to grow, and this is really something. I jumped something. Yes, this is what I'm explaining. That the bond between them occurred over many years. Not many years, several decades, during which they respected, honored, and cared for each other. Of course, starting with Abraham because he was the older, then he continued with Sarah. So this would explain, that's one of the reasons that it was very difficult for them to allow anything to come between them. They really, their life has grown together. They have grown together almost all their life. For Sarah, it was all her life. For Abraham, it was, there was 10 years that he wasn't with Sarah because Sarah had not been born. But right from the time Sarah was born, which was 75 years prior to these interactions, Abraham had loved and cared for this young woman. So their marital bond grew out of love, out of caring knowing each other for so long and living together and being together and seeing themselves as the same for all these years, all these decades. So when they had the issue with Hagar, even though there was potential that Hagar was the solution to a problem that they were concerned about, the problem of having a child, they would be happy to have a child to her, but not at the cost of any threat of disruption of their marital relationship. Honey, what do you think?
Well, that's very well said. That is absolutely true. But I also look at it from the point of view of the spirituality and the what a marital bond represents to God. What you know. Oftentimes it is said, what God has put together, let no man put asunder. Let nothing put asunder.
Yeah.
And yes, I'm just looking in the context of today's relationships. Many men would have taken sides with Hagar because of the seed she was carrying.
Yes.
And in fact, use it, to taunt Sarah. And, that would really would have jeopardized that relationship.
Yes.
And it's very important that that relationship was preserved, because that is the relationship that God made a covenant with.
Yes.
That it is Abraham and Sarah.
Yeah.
God will give Abraham the child of covenant through Sarah.
Yes.
If that relationship had been destroyed because of the mistake, and it's really a mistake that, and I'll come to that later, that Sarah made, both Sarah and Abraham made that mistake.
Yeah.
Okay? If it had been disrupted by their not, by Abraham not clinging onto his wife at the detriment of Sarah, of Hagar, and the child he was carrying, that relationship would have been, in jeopardy.
Yes.
Because we could already see that Sarah was a very angry woman.
Yes.
Saying, let my wrong be upon you. Let God judge between me and you. When a woman goes to that, you can see the amount of anger and everything. So anything could have happened to their relationship if Abraham had not chosen to stay in that relationship. If he had not chosen the wife of his youth, if he had not chosen, to stay in that particular relationship that he has come with, and God has been, talking to them when he said, leave this and leave that, and he moved with Sarah.
Yeah.
It's not like it was acquired at anywhere.
Yeah.
So that's very important that, we should always look at our priorities and what our choices are. When it comes to the issue of our relationship, our marital relationship and the bond, what is important, because in many cases you will find out that after that child, if it's not the one that God has made covenant, if it's not the one that God has said He will bless you through, for many women, God begins to bless them with their own, from children from their own womb. Look at Penina and Hannah and what's Samuel's father's?
Elkanah.
Yeah,
Hannah and
after Samuel was born, Hannah had so many other, at least about 5 more children.
Yeah, 4 or 5, I don't know.
Yeah,
so it looks like 5 total.
So we should be careful what we choose when it comes to choosing whether what should be our priority. Is it our relationship with our husband, or is it that extraneous thing that we are looking at pursuing, thinking that that is where it is. You know, so that's very important because they had to preserve that union.
Yes.
For God to walk through that union. As we could see in several chapters later, God became explicit as to, hey, Hagar wasn't it.
Yeah.
Now the other thing I wanted to mention here is that as women, and I think I've said this before, women are very strong influence over their husbands. In any relationship, women are very strong influence over their husband. And I've also said in the past, we have to use this power very wisely. We have to use it with fear and trembling. We have to use it with the fear of God, knowing that whatever we say is capable of totally disrupting God's agenda for the family.
Yeah.
Whatever we have seen this severally. We have seen this happen at least in one occasion, which was Eve and Adam. When Eve said, take this, eat it, nothing is going to happen, and Adam complied. See what he started.
Yeah.
Now in this case, Sarah took matters into her own hands and gave Hagar her mistress to her husband. And so people will say, okay, why didn't he refuse? But remember what I've just said, that women are very strong influence.
Yeah.
You know, they have that kind of influence. And a lot of things could have made, I'm not absolving Abraham at this point from this, but he complied. Both of them made a mistake. Okay? So Sarah took matters into her own hands and said, because of their quest or their eagerness to have a child or whatever. And another thing was, okay, God has said, child from your own body, and looking that I cannot have children.
Yes.
You know, she concluded, okay, let my maid servant, after all, your child is my child.
Yeah.
There will be you in that child.
Yes.
You know. So she decided to help God to fulfill God's promise in their life.
Yes.
Unfortunately, when we play God like that and walk according to plans that are not in God's scheme of things for fulfilling his promise to us, problems arise. Because man's ways are not the ways of God. And we can see this clearly.
Yeah.
The ways of man, they thought it was going to be through Hagar. But God had knew he was going to make these two people, it doesn't matter how old they were, give them the child of promise. And God eventually started referring, remember when he was going to sacrifice Isaac, he said, take your son, your only son. So Ishmael and Hagar were not in God's plan of things. Unfortunately, Sarah admitted, created that opening in the fence. And that's where this problem came from. And again, when we realize we have made mistakes, because obviously, as far as I know, for Sarah to come up and start saying, oh, I gave you my maid servant, and then now she despises me and all that, okay, she would have realized, hey, this is a mistake. And for letting even Hagar to go without trying to hold her, she said, this just isn't it. Okay? So the first thing she would have done wouldn't be to blame Abraham, because she brought this suggestion.
Yeah.
Rather than saying, hey, I've made a mistake, and repent of it, and in real life, this is what we do. We look for who to blame of our mistakes in a relationship, and it does not augur well for that relationship. When we have made mistakes, we should own up to it, ask for forgiveness, and seek redress for God to help us to address that situation. Yeah. So these are just some of the things in terms of husband-wife relationship that I see here, that influence that God somehow that women have over their husbands, and God has permitted it not to subdue their husbands but under submission. Okay, we have to be very careful as wives how we use it.
Yeah.
Because applying it wrongly can be very catastrophic. if the union of Abraham and Sarah had suffered, that interaction had packed up, where we would be? Where would we be today?
Yeah. Okay. Well, in fact, that's a dimension for this that we need to look at. Luckily, we get another opportunity to summarize this message, so hopefully we can bring it in at that time. And in fact, another aspect of it is how a couple should receive and nurture. I'm struggling for words here. To nurture God's promise, you have to. In this case, God made them a promise, and they became anxious and were trying to do what they could.
They were trying to help God.
Yeah, to do what they could. And actually that's not wrong. That's part of what God wants us to do. But at the same time, so we're gonna look at this carefully.
It's not wrong, but we should pray it down.
Yes.
Pray it down for God to give us
yes.
The revelation of what He wants us to do.
Yes.
Towards that.
And give us the patience
yes.
to actually wait for His fulfillment.
Because God could have said, hey, it's not Hagar. I will still keep my promise, it's not Hagar. And then, but this one, Sarah just decided on her own. So
and
it's not wrong.
They didn't, yes. and they didn't ask. They sort of saw that opportunity and believed that was the fulfillment, that was the way the promise would be fulfilled. And that's a very natural thing. I mean, it happens these days. I mean, we're always dealing with a promise from promises from God and waiting for God to answer our prayer and all that. And so one of the things we can learn from this is how to wait for God's fulfillment.
How to wait on God.
How to wait
for His promise.
Yes, so that to receive His guidance and follow His guidance. I think that's a dimension to this.
Because otherwise, we can make mistakes.
Well, they did.
We can make mistakes that will last beyond a lifetime.
Yes.
That will go down generations.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so we thank you to have been with us to get to the end of this Bible study. We pray that you will be more and more involved in our Bible study program, and that what you learn from our program will make a positive impact in your life and will bring you closer to God's purpose. Thank you, and God bless you.
God bless you, and continue to stay with us.